Yemi was just 22 years old when it happened. It was late at night, and the rain was falling hard. His sneakers were wet, and his clothes were starting to stick to his skin. He stood near a small gas station, watching his family drive away. They had told him, "Wait here, we'll be back soon. We just need to fix something." At first, he believed them. He waited near the pump, thinking maybe the car had a problem or they needed to buy something quickly. But minutes turned into hours. 1 hour passed, then 2. The gas station lights started to turn off one by one. The place was almost empty now, except for him. There were no more cars, no more people, just the sound of rain hitting the pavement. He looked at his phone, hoping for a message or a missed call. Nothing. His heart started to feel heavy, but he still hoped maybe they were stuck somewhere. Maybe something had gone wrong. But deep down, Yemi began to realize the truth. They weren't coming back. They had left him there on purpose. No fight, no shouting, no goodbye. Just a quiet, painful moment where everything changed. That was the night he felt the true meaning of being abandoned. Not with words, but with silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than anything else. Yemi sat on the small bench inside the gas station, hoping someone would come back for him. His clothes were still wet from the rain, and his hands were shaking, not just from the cold, but from fear and confusion. The gas station clerk saw him sitting there and allowed him to stay for a while. But after some time, the clerk gently told him he couldn't stay inside anymore. Rules were rules, and the station was about to close. Yemi nodded slowly, trying not to cry, and walked outside with his head down. He looked at his cracked phone. The screen flickered, barely working, and the battery was low. He checked again for any messages or missed calls from his family. Still nothing. All he had left in his pocket was 17 naira, barely enough to buy anything. His stomach was empty, and his heart felt even emptier. There was no one to call, no one to turn to, no idea what to do next. Around 2 a.m., with no strength left, Yemi looked around for a place to rest. The night was quiet, and the air was cold. He spotted a small corner behind the gas station, near the ice machine. It was the only dry spot he could find. He curled up there, trying to keep himself warm, using his arms as a pillow. He was too tired to cry, too weak to even feel angry. He just lay there, staring at the dark sky, wondering why this had happened to him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up weakly. It wasn't from his family. It was from someone he didn't know, a man named Kalu. He had seen Yemi earlier, standing helpless at the station. Kalu was a rideshare driver, and something about the boy had caught his attention. He had seen the fear in Yemi's eyes, the confusion on his face, and how long he waited without anyone coming back. Kalu sent a simple message. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Yemi stared at the message for a long time. His hands were shaking as he held the phone. It was the first sign of kindness he had seen all night. A stranger, not someone from his own blood, not someone who owed him anything, just a man who saw someone in pain and reached out. In that dark, lonely moment, Yemi didn't know it yet, but that one message would change his life forever. When Kalu arrived at the gas station, Yemi was still sitting behind the ice machine, tired, hungry, and cold. His phone battery was almost dead, and his body was aching from lying on the hard ground all night. Kalu stepped out of his car and walked up to him. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't say, "What happened?" or "Why are you here?" Instead, he simply handed Yemi a warm pack of jollof rice and a bottle of water. Yemi looked at the food, surprised. No one had helped him like this before. He had been ignored all night, but here was this stranger, kind and quiet, just offering help with no judgment. Yemi whispered, "Thank you," as he opened the food and took slow bites, trying not to cry in front of the man. Kalu sat beside him for a moment and said softly, "I'm heading back to town. If you want a ride, you can come with me." Yemi didn't think twice. He stood up and followed Kalu to the car. The ride was silent at first, but it wasn't awkward. It felt peaceful, safe. Kalu didn't press him for detail. He didn't want to dig into Yemi's pain. After a while, Kalu glanced over and said, "I work at a warehouse. We're short on hands. It's not fancy, but it's something. If you want it, it's yours." Yemi's eyes widened. He nodded quickly. "Yes, I'll do it. Anything," he said. He couldn't believe someone would trust him like this, especially after everything. A few hours later, they reached the warehouse. It was a noisy place with boxes, trucks, and workers moving around. Kalu introduced Yemi to the manager and told him, "He's with me. He's a good one." Just like that, Yemi was hired. That small act, offering food, a ride, and a job, wasn't small to Yemi. It was everything. It was the first step out of the darkness he had been thrown into. Kalu didn't just give him work, he gave him a chance to stand up again, to feel human again. That warehouse job became more than a way to earn money. It gave Yemi purpose, structure, and dignity. Every day, he showed up early, worked hard, and listened carefully. He wanted to prove that Kalu didn't make a mistake by helping him. Slowly, he started to rebuild his confidence. He had nothing when he was left at that gas station, just a cracked phone and 17 naira. But now, he had hope. And it all started with one stranger who saw him, believed in him, and opened a door that Yemi never imagined existed. Yemi didn't waste the opportunity Kalu gave him. From his first day at the warehouse, he worked harder than anyone else. He lifted heavy boxes, cleaned the floors, and did whatever job was given to him without complaining. He listened, observed, and quietly learned how everything worked. He started asking questions, not just about the work, but about the trucks, the delivery routes, and how goods moved from place to place. Every night after work, he would go back to a small, shared room and write ideas in an old notebook. He didn't have a laptop or fancy tools, just dreams and determination. While others went out or relaxed, Yemi studied. He watched free online videos about business, logistics, and technology. He saved every naira he could, cutting down on meals just to buy more data to keep learning. At 26, he finally took a risk. Using the small savings he had and borrowing a little from someone he met at work, Yemi started his own logistics business. It wasn't big, it was just him, a second-hand laptop, and a broken table inside a one-bedroom apartment with lights that kept going on and off. But it was his. He named it Yem Speed Logistics. He started by helping small vendors in his area deliver goods. Slowly, people started trusting him. 2 years later, by the time he was 28, the business was growing. He hired his first 2 workers, then 4. His small room turned into a small office. Clients started calling him directly. He reinvested everything back into the company, buying better tools, better transport, and building a stronger team. He never stopped learning, never stopped moving forward. At 30, Yemi stood on a stage at a tech summit, invited to speak about innovation in African logistics. He wore a simple suit, but he spoke with confidence and heart. He told the crowd, "I was once left behind, but that night made me who I am." The audience stood and clapped, not just for his success, but for his story. By 32, something incredible happened. The same warehouse where he used to pack boxes, the place where his journey started, went up for sale. Yemi bought it, with his own money, no loans, no help. He stood in front of the building, now freshly painted and full of life, and smiled. He remembered the cold night he spent outside. He remembered the boxes, the sweat, the pain. But most of all, he remembered Kalu, the man who gave him a ride, a job, and a chance. Yemi had built more than a company. He had built a life. One quiet afternoon, Yemi was sitting in his office, going through some papers, when his assistant knocked and said, "There's someone here who says they know you." Yemi looked up, surprised. When the door opened, it was one of his cousins, someone he hadn't seen in over 10 years. The cousin laughed nervously and said, "Wow, what a surprise. I was just passing by and thought to check if this was really your office." Yemi smiled politely, but inside, he felt something strange. He remembered clearly. This was the same cousin who had avoided him when he was struggling. A few days later, another visitor came. This time, it was his younger brother, the one who used to make fun of him and call him names when they were growing up. He walked in like nothing had happened and said, "Hey bro, I was just in the area and thought I'd stop by." He looked around the big office with wide eyes, impressed by everything. Yemi offered him a seat, asked if he wanted a drink, but again, that same heavy feeling was in the room. Then, the biggest surprise came. His parents walked in. The same parents who had left him at that gas station. The same ones who had never called, never sent a message, not even once in the last 10 years. They walked in smiling, holding wrapped gifts, acting as if nothing had ever happened. "We're so proud of you," his mother said, placing the gift on his table. His father nodded and added, "We knew you'd make it. We always believed in you." Yemi's assistant leaned closer and whispered, "Should I ask them to leave?" But Yemi shook his head gently and said, "No, it's okay. Let them stay." He didn't raise his voice, He didn't ask why they came now. He didn't even mention the past. But as they sat in front of him, talking like they had always been close, the air in the office turned cold. Not physically, but emotionally. It was like sitting with strangers who wore familiar faces. Everything looked normal on the outside, but deep inside, something had broken long ago. Yemi looked at them and smiled, but it wasn't the same smile as before. It was polite, distant. He didn't feel hate. He didn't feel love either. Just emptiness. They had missed the years that built him, the nights he cried alone, the days he fought to survive. And now, they were here, calling it all a coincidence. But Yemi knew better. This wasn't an accident. They had heard about his success. And now, they wanted a seat at the table they never helped him build. Yemi sat at the long table in his office. Across from him were the same people who had once left him behind without a word. His parents, his brother, and the cousin who claimed to be just passing by. Now, they were all trying to explain themselves. His mother spoke first, her voice soft and careful. "It wasn't easy back then," she said. "We were going through so much. We didn't know what to do." His father added, "We thought you'd be okay. It was a mistake, a bad decision. But we're still family, Yemi. Blood is blood." Then his brother spoke. "We didn't forget about you. We just didn't know how to reach you. Things were complicated." They all had stories, different words, same message. It wasn't their fault. It was money. It was confusion. It was stress. They talked like people who had done nothing wrong, like people who were only guilty of being a little lost in life. Yemi didn't interrupt. He sat quietly and listened, just like he had always done before, when he was younger, when they made him feel invisible. But now, he was different. He wasn't the boy at the gas station anymore. He had seen the world with his own eyes. He had built something strong from nothing, and he had learned the hard way what love really means. When they finished speaking, Yemi took a deep breath and looked at them calmly. Then he said, "You keep saying blood is blood, but to me, family isn't the people who leave you standing in the rain. Family is the one who gives you an umbrella, even if they don't know your name." His words were soft, but they hit hard. The room went quiet. Nobody knew what to say next. Yemi wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting, but his voice had power, because it came from pain. Pain that had turned into strength. They had left him in the dark, but someone else, a stranger named Kalu, had been the one to pull him into the light. That was what real family looked like to him now. The people in front of him shared his blood, but they didn't share his journey. They weren't there when he was hungry, cold, or alone. They didn't see him cry behind the ice machine. They didn't see him lift boxes, build a company, or fight for a better life. So now, he didn't see them the same way either. Their words couldn't change the past, and their guilt couldn't buy back the years they were missing from his story. Yemi had come a long way. His company was now one of the fastest growing logistics businesses in the country. So, he decided to host a special banquet to celebrate his team. The people who worked hard beside him, believed in his vision, and helped build everything from the ground up. The hall was beautiful, filled with lights, music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Important people were there. Investors, business leaders, even reporters. Cameras were everywhere, capturing every moment. His team looked proud. They smiled as they walked in, dressed in their best clothes. For many of them, this was their first time at such a big event. Yemi made sure they all felt seen, valued, and celebrated. Then, something unexpected happened. His family showed up. They weren't invited, but they walked in, wearing expensive clothes, acting like everything was fine. His father smiled and waved like a proud dad. His mother carried a small gift box. His brother and cousin nodded at people, pretending they belonged there. Some guests assumed they were important family members, but Yemi saw through all of it. He didn't say anything right away. He greeted them politely, without emotion. The banquet continued. Speeches were made, awards were given, and then it was time for the final toast, the most important moment of the night. Everyone went quiet. Cameras turned toward Yemi as he stood up, holding a glass. He looked around the room, then his eyes stopped at the back, where a quiet, older man stood in the shadows. Kalu. He had come, dressed simply, staying away from the attention. He didn't want to be noticed, but Yemi noticed. He raised his glass and said, "Tonight, I want to thank someone very special, someone who didn't share my blood but saved my life." People turned to look at each other. Whispers started. Yemi smiled and pointed toward the back. "Kalu," he said clearly, "please come forward." Everyone clapped as Kalu slowly walked to the front, looking surprised and shy. Yemi hugged him, then held his hand in the air. "This man found me when I had nothing," Yemi continued. "No food, no home, no hope. He didn't ask questions. He gave me a ride, a job, and a second chance." The whole room stood up and clapped. Some people had tears in their eyes. The moment was powerful. Yemi didn't even glance at his family during the toast. They stood off to the side, watching quietly, realizing that they had lost their place. Not because Yemi wanted revenge, but because they had walked away when it mattered most. And now, someone else had taken the seat they gave up. Not because of blood, but because of heart. Yemi didn't want to fight. He didn't want to argue or scream. He had already been through the worst, being left behind by the people he called family. But now, he was no longer that boy. He was a man who had built his own path. So when the time came to speak at the end of the banquet, he didn't speak with anger. He spoke with truth. The room was full of people, his team, business partners, reporters, and even the family who had once abandoned him. Everyone waited to hear what he would say. The lights dimmed a little. The cameras pointed at him. And then Yemi began. He told the story of a young boy who stood in the rain, waiting at a gas station for people who never came back. A boy with wet sneakers, an empty stomach, and only 17 naira in his pocket. He told them how that boy slept behind an ice machine, cold and alone, with no one to care. Then he spoke about the man who stopped to help him, a man who asked nothing in return. That small act of kindness gave him a second chance at life. Yemi talked about packing boxes, saving money, and starting his own business in a one-bedroom apartment with lights that didn't always work. He told them how he failed many times, but he never gave up. And now, he had built something strong, something that helped others, something that made him proud. The room was silent, listening closely. Not a single person moved. Then Yemi said, "I used to think I needed to prove something to the people who left me, but I've learned I don't need revenge. I just needed my voice, and I have it now." The crowd stood up. Applause filled the hall. People clapped. Some even wiped away tears. They were touched by his journey, his strength, and his honesty. But his family, they stayed seated. Their hands didn't move. Their faces were still, because deep down, they knew. This was not their moment. This was not their story. They had removed themselves from it long ago. Yemi didn't look at them again. He didn't have to. His success spoke louder than any words. He didn't punish them. He didn't insult them. He simply rose above and let them watch. And that sometimes is the greatest payback of all. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with peace, growth, and the power to stand tall without the ones who once left you behind. Years ago, when Yemi was at his lowest, his own brother was one of the loudest voices against him. He used to laugh at Yemi, calling him names, saying he was useless, saying he would never amount to anything. One sentence always stayed in Yemi's heart: "You'll always be the weakest link." It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, like Yemi was less, like he didn't matter. But life has a way of turning. Now, years later, Yemi was no longer that struggling boy. He had built a name, a business, and a future. And one day, while checking his emails, he saw something unexpected, a job application. It had his brother's name on it. Attached was a CV and a short message: "Looking for any available role. Hope to hear from you soon." Yemi stared at the message for a long time. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel joy either, just a quiet understanding of how far he had come and how much had changed. He didn't ignore the message. Instead, he picked up the phone and called his brother. His voice was calm. "I saw your application," he said. His brother sounded nervous. "Yes, I was hoping maybe something is available." Yemi paused. Then he replied, "There's no job for you here, but I'll pay your rent for 1 year." The other end of the line went silent. Yemi continued, "This isn't about revenge. I just want to help, but I can't give you space in my life again. I forgive you, but I won't sit with ghosts." His brother tried to speak, but Yemi had already said what needed to be said. He wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. Some relationships, even with family, are better left in the past. Not because of hate, but because of peace. Yemi had learned that forgiving someone doesn't always mean letting them back in. Sometimes it means giving them kindness, without giving them access to your heart again. And that's exactly what he did. He sent the rent money quietly, with no conditions, no lectures, and no drama. Then he moved forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity, because he knew real strength isn't just about rising above. It's about knowing who belongs with you when you finally reach the top and who doesn't. Time passed, and Yemi's name became known across the country. He was no longer just a successful businessman. He was an inspiration. People wanted to hear his story. He was invited to speak at big events, and every time he walked into a room, people stood to clap. They admired his strength, his rise from nothing, and his heart. One day, a major magazine released a cover story about him. The title read, "The Boy Who Built His Own Table." It spread everywhere. People shared it online, quoted his words, and called him a hero. From far away, his family watched. They were not close to him anymore, not part of his inner circle, but they still followed his journey. They talked about him to others, saying, "That's our son," or "That's my brother." But deep down they knew they had left him once, and now they had to celebrate him from a distance. There was no seat at his table for them anymore, only a memory of what they lost. But Yemi didn't let fame change him. Every month, without fail, he visited Kalu, the man who had once picked him up from behind a gas station, the man who had given him food, a job, and hope when no one else did. Kalu was older now, retired and living quietly, but Yemi never forgot him. Sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes they laughed about old times. But every visit reminded Yemi of where he came from and who truly mattered. He didn't post those visits online. He didn't bring cameras or show off, because real love doesn't need to be seen. Real loyalty doesn't need to be announced. It just stays, quiet, strong, unshaken. Yemi had built more than a company. He had built a life, a legacy, and a new definition of family, and the boy they once abandoned. He became the man they now toasted from afar. But the one person Yemi continued to toast, in his heart, every single day, was the man who believed in him when he had nothing. And that's what made Yemi truly rich. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll past. Like, share, and comment. Real family is chosen. Tag someone who needs to hear this today, because sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones who share your blood, but the ones who show up when it matters.